In the last lesson, we created our Artable user model and stored a new user in a Firestore users collection. And that's all well and good, but how do we access that information in our app once we have created that new user upon registration? A user's information is often used globally throughout the app, so I believe that this is a good case for using a singleton. We're going to create a UserService singleton whose purpose is to fetch and hold information about the logged in user. It's going to fetch and listen for changes to our user document, fetch and listen for changes to our favorites collection, handle logic for when a product is favorited, and handle the logout for the user. So let's get started. I'm going to create a new group called services. So right click on your Artable project, say new group and services. Then I'm going to right click on services and say new file. This is going to be a Swift file, say next, and call this user service and continue. All right, so let's go ahead and create this. I'm going to say this is going to be a singleton. So we're going to say final class underscore user service. And this is a convention that I saw and liked from Stripe documentation. So you say class underscore user service, and then you say let user service equal underscore user service, just like that. And then in our code, you don't have to do things like user service.instance. Whatever. You're just calling user service. Very good. We're gonna also need Firebase and Firestore. So Firestore, Firebase auth, and Firebase Firestore. All right, so we said that we're going to be holding some information about our user in this singleton. So let's go ahead and define what those variables are. First off, we are going to have a user object of type user, and we'll just initialize it as to its default empty values. Next, we're going to have the favorites stored here. So this is going to be an array of product. Started out as an empty array. Then we're going to be using auth and Firestore. So I'm going to create just a couple of variables here for auth, auth.auth, and then let db. This is going to be our Firestore instance, firestore.firestore. Then I also said that we're going to be listening for changes to our user document and our favorites collection. So we are going to need a couple of listener registration objects. So I'm going to say user listener. This is of type listener registration. And we'll go ahead and make this optional and initialized to nil. Then we're going to need our favorites listener. So I'm going to say var faves listener. This is another listener registration, and I'm going to make it optional and initialized to nil as well. And then while we're here, remember, we want users to be able to use this app as a guest, but we want to be able to restrict certain things for guest users. For instance, they can't make favorites, they can't make purchases. So what we're going to do is we need a quick way to know if the user is a guest or not. So let's go ahead and create a computed property here called isGuest. And this is going to be a Boolean. And we are going to say that it is a guest if it is not logged in or the user is currently logged in as anonymous, okay? So we're gonna say guard let auth user equal auth dot current user, else we will return true. So if there isn't any logged in auth user, then obviously we are a guest. So we're going to return true. Next, we're going to check to see if this auth user is anonymous. And if it is, then that's also a guest. So we'll return true. So I'm going to say if auth user that is anonymous, then we'll return true. Otherwise, We are logged in as an authenticated user, and we are not a guest, so we return false. Very good. So now whenever we need to know whether we are a guest, we can just say UserService.isGuest and then do whatever we need to do from there. All right, next up, let's go ahead and create our function that will get the current user's information and the favorites. We'll start with the user itself. So I'm going to say func get current user. And here what we're going to do is just create a user document reference to our user through the users collection and using the user's UID. So I'm going to say, first we're going to make sure that we have a user logged in. So I'm going to say guard let auth user equal auth dot current user, else return. If we're not logged in, then we obviously don't have a user to get. And then we're going to say let user ref equal db dot collection users dot document, and the ID for the user document is its UID. So I'm going to say auth user dot UID. So we have our user ref. We know where we need to look to get our user's document. So I'm going to say user listener is equal to user ref dot add snapshot listener. Press return, and we get back a document snapshot. So I'm going to say snap and an optional error. Let's handle the error. We're going to say if let error is equal to error. We will debug print that error, error.localized description, and we'll return. If we are successful, then we are going to parse out that data and initialize a user object from it and set it equal to our user right here. Okay, so I'm going to say guard let data is equal to snap dot data else return, and then we're going to say self dot user is equal to user dot init, and we're going to initialize it with our data initializer and pass in this data right here. All right, very good. So again, to recap, we are creating our users reference, our document reference, which goes to our users collection and then gets our specific user document. We create a listener so that any changes that occur on our user document will be reflected here in our app. And this is so that if the user, for instance, changes their username or their email or whatever, the user document will always be up to date in our app. Then once we get the data, we just initialize the user and set it equal to our singleton variable user. Next up, we have our favorites reference, and we're going to put this inside of the same getCurrentUser function. So we are going to say let faves ref equal, and what we can do here is remember our favorites collection is going to be a sub-collection of our user document. So we already have our user document reference. What we can do is just tack onto it the collection for favorites that is going to go right here. So back in Xcode, our favorites reference can be user ref that we defined up here, collection.users.document, and then tack on .collection and get our sub reference or our sub collection for the favorites collection. Then we can say faves listener is equal to faves ref dot add snapshot listener, press enter, and for this we get back a query snapshot and an optional error. So again, let's check to see if there are any errors. Just going to copy this and paste it here. And then we are going to say snap dot documents dot for each. We're going to iterate through each of these documents. And we're going to say document here. And we are going to initialize new products and append them to our favorites array up here. So we say let favorite equal product.init from data, and we pass in document.data, and then we say self.favorites, and oh, I said favorites here. All right, so change that to favorites. Self.favorites.append our new favorite. Let's see here, make this just a singular favorite. There we go. And there we have it. Now we are listening for changes to our user document and our favorites collection. And anytime there is an update, we update our user object here and our favorites array right here. Very good. Now let's go ahead and add our logout function. Down here, I'm going to say func logout user. And this is just going to reset some defaults here. So we're going to say user listener dot remove. User listeners equal to nil. Faves listener dot remove. So we're removing our listeners, and then faves listener and setting them equal to nil. And then we'll reset our user to just a generic empty user. And we will clear out our favorites array by saying favorites.remove all. Let's save that, and let's call our logout user in our home VC where we are handling our log in and out logic. Let's see, where is that? Here we go. So right here under our try.signout, let's go ahead and say UserService.logoutUser and save that. So we're logging out our user, but now we need to figure out where we want to call our getCurrentUser function, okay? So I think that right after we either log in for the first time and register a new user, we're going to come back to our viewDidAppear. And here is where we are currently saying that we are logged in. And so what we want to do is we want to do a check to see if our user listener is currently active, all right? Because we could come back to this screen and already have a user listener set, and in which case we don't want to duplicate that. So we're going to say if UserService.userListener is equal to nil, then we will say UserService.getCurrentUser. And then that will start the process of updating our user object in our user service as well as the favorites products. All right, let's go ahead and test this, and we'll do that by coming up to our user service, and after we get our user, let's just go ahead and print it. So I'm going to say print user. Let's save it and run it. Oh, I need to say self.user. There we go. And remember that you need to do this with a new registered user. Your previous users won't have this, your user document, okay? All right, so let's see if that printed out. Oh, yep, here we go. All right, so here's my user information. Very good. All right, so we are working. Obviously, our favorites doesn't have anything in it yet because we haven't implemented that, but that's what we're going to be working on in the next lesson. So just to recap, in this lesson, we created our user service. We have our user and our favorites that we will be able to access from anywhere in our app, thanks to this being a singleton. We are listening for changes to our document, our user document, and our favorites. And when we log out, we clear out all of the user information, remove the listeners and the favorites. All right, so I will see you in the next one where we work on adding favorites to our favorites collection. I'll see you there.